Hey guys, we have each played around 3 hours of Watch Dogs Legion. It's a super interesting entry in Watch Dogs, particularly because of their play as anyone mechanic, which seemed like it wasn't going to work. Actually kind of works pretty well. So we'll jump right in. What did you guys think of the fact that every single NPC in the world can be recruited to DedSec and played?
It's one of those things you hear about and you're like, oh, how is that even going to be possible? Then you get in and then you literally just go to anyone on the street and the recruit button is right there. And sometimes you can do it instantly. Sometimes you need to do a bit of a mission to like actually get them in. But it's just one of those things that it's one of those, I guess, next gen feeling things where it's like, okay, this is what we can do now. The technology is so advanced that literally anyone can just be your main play character in this game.
Most of them have unique abilities that are suited to their like charisma. So for example, we had a construction worker to choose from. There was someone I recruited off the street who was really into hacking. So the hacking ability was actually sped up and I could hack different objects in the world more efficiently with that character. So there's a dynamic of almost not necessarily class-based system, but it plays like that. And the fact that these things are randomly generated and from what we played so far are pretty like well put together. Like there's no, we didn't really see anything that was broken about it. It's pretty impressive to see it in practice.
Yeah, I was shocked at how well it worked. I recruited someone who I wasn't able to recruit instantly. So when we kicked off, we played a little bit of the prologue. Then we were thrown, I think, around 10 or 15 hours into the game, we were told, where you could recruit a ton of people instantly. And it feels like The Sims. It's just like these people have schedules, they have lives, they have relationships with other people in London. And sometimes you needed to explore those relationships in I think it was called a deep investigation.
Yeah,
feature.
It's kind of like Shenmue. Like every character in Shenmue, in like the tiny village of Shenmue, had a time and place that they would be every day. And when you pick someone off the street, you can just keep them in your log basically, and you can come back to them later, and it'll tell you, at 11 o'clock they go to work, and they'll be at this place. So then you go to that place at that time. And you can also just hit a button and wait for them, but they will be somewhere as part of their life. And it makes it feel like a real world, it's kind of wild.
Yeah, there's definitely an element that feels organic about it, even though these things are procedurally generated. Another interesting thing is that there are a lot of characters or NPCs on the street who aren't fans of DedSec. Like they are actually opposed to DedSec. And so you have to go through a bit of an extra step in order to recruit them. Such as like the Albion police force that roams the streets. You can actually flip them over, but you have to do something for them. So that's when that scheduling thing comes into place, and the profiling mechanics really come to surface, is because you have to kind of understand, oh, there's an extra layer that I need to take care of if I really want them on my team. So yeah, that's also an interesting thing. And like some of the missions, or at least a mission that we played, had you do exactly that.
Yeah, I found it interesting because I was immediately suspicious of whether this system was going to work. So I picked someone up at the very start of the game to go through we were given like 4 or 5 main missions we had access to and some side content. So I went through a multi-part recruitment quest process. It was only like a couple of different quests. He had a missing person case, a friend of his had gone missing, and it's someone you had to go retrieve and save from like a little Albion stronghold. It wasn't overly difficult, but it added a few extra steps, and the fact that these things are procedurally generated honestly is like hard to get your head around. But then I used him for the rest of my 3-hour playthrough pretty much, and the way he seamlessly fit into every conversation, like he had unique things to say. Like I mean you have to wonder how they have written so many different voice lines and how many different voice actors they got for all these different characters. But I got on a bike at one point and he's like, oh, my mom would kill me if she knew I was riding this bike.
Mom would kill me if she saw me riding this.
He just felt like such a complete person, which is also something that I find now horrifying in combat and running around the world in a GTA style, because running people down when they have lives, personalities, and relationships is terrifying.
So the game will actually point out recruits that have extraordinary abilities that might help you especially. So like one person could be a hitman and they have like real guns. But if you accidentally run over one of those people, the AI in your head will be like, oh man, that guy could have been really useful. We just killed that guy, so never mind. Let's move on. Obviously, we only played a few hours, but I'm really curious to see how this tracks over like a 60, 80 hour period, because I feel like you will run into a few anomalies. So one of my first characters that I had was like a middle-aged, like Asian grandma kind of person who was a UFC fighter for some reason, which is a completely implausible situation to begin with. But sort of, even though she only looked about 40 or 50, she had the grandma voice that the grandma that we saw in the trailers. So she sounded way too old.
300 of my colleagues were all made redundant a few weeks ago.
How dreadful.
But I think what really shines is that their unique traits are important for gameplay perspective. So one of the missions actually took place in a construction zone, and the main character I was playing as was a construction worker, so I waltzed right in without anyone turning like to me and with any suspicion, unless I got too close for some reason. But I was able to walk around this dangerous zone without any problem. Of course, once I got to the hostage, then I freed them, and then I was able to walk right out after that. And I saw how important it is to have a variety of characters. So like the recruitment system, like I got attached to that one character. I want to play with him throughout the rest of the game. That would have been cool. But I think it's important to, when you play this game, to have an assortment of roles, because you never know when the situation may come up that you need a certain ability, or if you need a certain way to present the certain character to get through a mission in a certain way.
Yeah, definitely. Some of my hacker characters had crazy abilities that let them sort of like steal keys from just like any distance, because usually that's a proximity based attempt. And while like every character can do some basic hacking and has basic sort of stun weapons, like obviously some folks will exceed in certain abilities.
Being able to recruit anybody it instills the sense of like community and trying to get everyone on board, like in a social way with the campaign of DedSec and what they're trying to do. Not that we got that full story, being that we only played a few hours, but it seems to be able to achieve it in a way that, you know, no other game has a system where this works, where that's a possible thing, even if it isn't like perfectly seamless. So I think you played a little bit more of the story than we did, Michael. What's the general setup that you got the sense of, and how'd you find it?
The setup is that London is falling, and there have been terrorist bomb attacks throughout London, and DedSec has been trying to get to the root of it. But what ends up happening is that London is thrown into a police state, a surveillance state, and then a private military corporation comes in to be the law enforcers, which I think I personally have concerns about as it fits into Watch Dogs Legion's themes. But there's essentially 4 ringleaders who are supposed to be the evil ones that you're supposed to take down. We only saw 2 of them so far. So one is the evil bad guy who runs Albion, which is the private military corporation. And you see a lot of images of police brutality on the streets as carried out by the Albion officers that roam the streets. And then there's another character. She is kind of the head of a crime syndicate of a vast criminal underground throughout London.
Yeah, I found it was really weird going around London, because I think the game looks gorgeous, even in its current state of like what we had access to in, I think you had a streamed build and we were able to go in, but I think they were still running in less quality than they will have upon proper release. But it's strange when I'm like buzzing through it. All the future vehicles, by the way, oh my gosh, night and day to driving a car at the start of Watch Dogs 1, which straight up made me stop playing that game. But speaking of which, there is plenty of different ways to play Watch Dogs Legion. And one of the things I really enjoyed was how much leeway you seem to get. Like I would have most of my missions go to hell, and I did not have clever ways of getting in. I'm not a hacker extraordinaire, so I'd end up just getting in massive firefights. But I found that getting away from combat situations and also just taking out a ton of officers non-lethally was a completely viable way of going about things and didn't destroy my playthrough at all. But how did you guys approach missions? Were you hackers or combat or?
I kind of did a mix of both. I had a hacker character because one of the big things I really liked about the Watch Dogs series in the past is being able to complete a mission, just sitting outside on a park bench, basically. And you can do that with your little spider bot that can remotely trigger like physical like circuit breakers and computers and stuff, as well as hopping from security camera to security camera and downloading data that way. And obviously with a hacker character, you have more powerful abilities to do that. And I also did a bunch of stealth using my hitman and using like gun food takedowns and all that kind of stuff. So it's fun to do both, which is good. And I feel like one of the joys of this game is going to be going into a mission with the wrong character and like seeing all the ways that you can work your way out of it.
One of the conversations about Watch Dogs 2 was how a lot of situations devolved into lethal gunfights. I feel like Ubisoft has taken that into account for Watch Dogs Legion because there are a lot of less than lethal options in this game. So you can have a pistol, a submachine gun, and even a shotgun that are all shooting like taser rounds. So you don't have to actually kill anyone. I don't want to be the one to enact the violence because that is what we're trying to fight against. Of course, some situations in a game may call for that, but I was pretty impressed with the way that the less than lethal guns worked.
Because ordinary citizens are not going to be cool with just like shooting fools in their heads.
Right.
It kind of checks out. And speaking of always being on the back foot, I noticed that some of the characters in the game actually have negative perks. So, for example, some of the really good characters that might have a very powerful ability might also have a negative ability that says when this guy or girl dies, they die for good. Like usually when one of your characters goes down, they get hospitalized or they get arrested, and that you have to wait for a cooldown before you can start using them again. You can also recruit like people like paramedics and judges to help them get out faster. But really old people aren't as mobile, so you can't like crouch. Clint Hocking, who's the creative director for Legion, worked on Far Cry 2, which was like infamously a game that always had you on the back foot and always threw negative shit at you, like getting malaria and just like your gun jamming, and just that puts you in like edge of your seat, like really tense situations all the time. And I can see that kind of existing here as well, especially in a time of like social media and people sharing like funky stuff that happens in their games. I feel like this is going to be a good candidate for those kinds of moments.
With Watch Dogs 2, I really liked Marcus Holloway as a character. And I think that game told a story that was specifically for him through his eyes, through his interactions with DedSec. So I think you're going to lose an element of that with Watch Dogs Legion. You're not going to get character-specific narrative. And I think, and I hope that Watch Dogs Legion like makes up for that with how it tackles its themes. But I'll get attached to a certain character probably because it's one of those things like those permadeath situations where like, oh, in XCOM, oh, my favorite rifleman died and now I can't use them anymore. I think that'll play into that. But in terms of like building characters, that'll have to happen to the characters you don't control. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, but we'll see.
Well, great. Thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts. And do check back to site where we have plenty of things on Watch Dogs Legion and everything else that we found out from the Ubisoft Forward stream. So stay tuned to GameSpot and we will see you next time.